And Katie, hi, welcome to What the Force and our Celebrating Willow conversation. Thanks so much for joining me.
No, thanks for having me on.
So, Katie, you're a data scientist and you have made it a weird hobby of yours to study the data of how sort of shows get treated by the populace. And you noticed, especially with Willow, that there was a common trend that was happening. And that's why I brought you on to talk about it. But first, I wanted to ask you how you enjoyed Willow.
I liked it. I thought it was really cute. I had a good time with it. I definitely there was definitely characters that stood out to me. And I actually really liked the way that they developed over the course of the show because, like, for example, I was like texting people like with Kit. I was like in episode 3, I was like, like I know she has to get past this and that's part of her arc, but like I really need her to get past this. And then by the end, she was like my favorite character. So there was definitely, yeah, just some great arcs even in, the single season. Cause obviously like there's so much more to come for like Laura's development that I'm really excited about. Graydon's development, which I'm super excited about.
Mhm.
Borman was MVP. But yeah, no, it was a very like refreshing show to watch, I think. And as somebody who frankly doesn't really keep up with TV shows, it was a nice, yeah, like change of pace. So I had a good time.
That's awesome. So what did you notice that was like happening with Willow that had been happening with other shows?
I guess I'll actually start in 2016 because frankly, a lot of this
Hmm.
comes from the politicization of uh what really started on as a 4chan tactic on YouTube, which was to
Mm.
mass downvote YouTube videos. And that started, I guess you can argue it started in 2010, where they just really got hyper fixated on Justin Bieber. And a lot of it was trolling, although you could make the case it was because Justin Bieber was, his target audience was girls, it was women, and certain boys and men on the internet can't handle things that teenage girls like. So that definitely was an element, but there wasn't really as much malicious intent as it was trolling back in 2010.
Hmm.
And so, Baby got famously mass downvoted. And then there was all this other stuff going on where he was like constantly like his pages were being redirected to porn sites and people tried to get like, or 4chan did this campaign where they got a Google hot trend of like, I forget exactly what the phrase was, but they got, this like inappropriate phrase tied to Justin Bieber trending on Google. And it was like stuff like that. And so then when we get to 2016, by this time, a lot of those tactics and a lot of those groups had been highly politicized um, for really what became a part of the basis for the election of Donald Trump. And a lot of this is driven by Breitbart News. And so when the all-female reboot of Ghostbusters came out, that's when you really
Mm.
start to see this tactic get started. The trailer became, famously or infamously one of the most downvoted YouTube videos in YouTube history. Leslie Jones was very targeted.
Mm.
And you just saw this backlash that went beyond this trolling that you saw in 2010. Now it was, oh my God, they're rebooting Ghostbusters with all women and it's going to destroy culture. A
So it
normal
became
reaction to have.
it became more of like a war in some ways, like people were trying to defend their turf.
Yeah, so I mean, culture wars are obviously nothing different. This is just the way that the 21st century version of it has manifested because the internet gives people tools to do this. And I'm not advocating that you go and watch any of these videos, but as somebody who talks about it a lot, I watch them because I want to know for sure what's being said, how it's being said, how it's being
Mhm.
framed, etc. And yeah, you will absolutely hear, culture war come up a lot in that, like, this is something that they feel like they're fighting in order to save. They never phrase it like this. It is never phrased like this, but it is, the very colonized version of white Judeo-Christian values and white culture in the West. So anything that's seen as threatening that is then rolled into, I mean, of course, everybody's heard the term woke agenda. It essentially just means anything that's a threat to traditional perspectives of, white European culture.
Yeah.
I use,
and it's
and it's also a completely made up issue, right? Because the way that it's gotten so politicized is that it was a topic that is taken into meaning a political agenda, but what it actually means is just the right for a non-white person, a gay person, just people from marginalized communities to exist in this piece of media previously occupied by a white straight person. But because, just very basic, I guess, ways of, accepting humanity, or however you want to call it, like in our art, right? That's been turned into something that's become like left wing, right wing, even though it's not, human rights are not politics. But because they politicize it, they can make that a platform. So for example, right, like a big one they'll always use is like, oh, because Top Gun made $1.5 billion in the worldwide box office, it did so because it didn't have a woke agenda, right? But where this falls apart is, okay, if we're looking at political agendas here, one of the biggest movies that came out that arguably did have a political commentary to give was actually Spider-Man No Way Home, where a big plot point in that is a right-wing media host, very much an Alex Jones clone, making Peter's life hell. And then he gets this whole plan of, oh, I want to erase everybody's memory and change my life. That was actually a political commentary, but you won't see those guys speaking about that. That movie also made more money than Top Gun Maverick. But of course, Top Gun Maverick, right, made a lot of money because it was a long anticipated sequel to a well done, beloved film. And Spider-Man made a lot of money because it was the third installment in, one of the biggest IPs of all time. And it had like all the other Spider-Mans in it. So those are the actual reasons why these movies make money. But it doesn't, they can't, they as in like these YouTubers and people who lead this type of agenda, right? Like they can't make money or get a platform if they're not constantly raising fear, right? So they completely hate, right?
It's like mining hate for clicks and views and things like that do equate to money.
Right. Yeah. And then they completely negate that, like, Black Panther made what, 1.3 billion, 1.34 billion, without any, previous installment, right? Like that was the first one.
It's like selective hearing and choices to fit the rhetoric of the day.
So that's how this all kind of got going. And it's been the same, just rinse and repeat across, from Ghostbusters to, we won't go through The Last Jedi, but obviously this, a lot of the YouTubers leading this now got started, you can argue, more through The Last Jedi in 2018. They like loosely organized after Solo didn't do as well as it was, people thought it was going to. And there's a lot of valid reasons for that. But of course, like, they claim that it was, because of all of, their outrage over the political agenda of The Last Jedi, which of course that was not the reason that Solo performed the way that it did. But and then it went on to like Lord of the Rings, and like we'll talk about that a little bit. And then now Willow to a lesser extent, but it's still absolutely there. So it's just, that's how they make money, and it works for them, right? And until it doesn't work for them, we're going to constantly see this.
Let's get to the data, because I always love this part where we can actually see these things in action.
So I have slides. So I'm just going to go through this. I'm going to make this as quick as possible. I know that numbers aren't everybody's jam. But so where I wanted to start is initially with these reviews. Review bombing is such a useful tactic to this whole like the whole like culture war idea, because it's so visible, and because media still, and media as in like, you know, the trades, or anybody like talking film, right? Forbes. No, I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but I'll just say that the one very, very negative review from Forbes is written by a guy who follows all of these YouTubers. Wow, imagine that. Anyway, but that's a different topic. We're not going to do that. But anyway, looking at that IMDb though, right? Like, what I wanted to do was pull ratings from. Actually, I would love your opinion on this. Is Willow like general audience for kids, or is it like young adult? Because I couldn't quite tell.
So I actually think it's PG-13 in my opinion, which means kids can watch it with their parents present and stuff like that. But if I were to like place it somewhere, because there is a lot of talk and implied sexuality, but yet younger kids, it might just like go over their heads, and their parents are like, yeah, that's cool. So it's really all ages in my opinion. And it's not as gory as say Willow the movie was, which was quite gory in part.
Yeah. So I just wanted to pull like, I guess, like young adult leaning shows with a woman lead, although I'm not quite sure. I don't know anything about the Dark Materials. I just know it kind of falls into that fantasy category. So I have Dark Materials, Shadow and Bone, and WandaVision. So these were all like well received shows, generally by the audience. So you can see the distributions on these on IMDb is that you have that concentration around like the 8, and it's really anywhere from 7 to 10. So it definitely skews towards 10, towards really high marks. But you don't really see anything going towards like pretty much less than 6. Like it's all very stacked at the top, but it's fairly evenly distributed between 7 and 10. Then what I wanted to do is I wanted to pull, so going on to the next slide here, I wanted to pull shows that are kind of famously known for not being the best thing ever put on television, but like, people had fun with them, people watched them. So then I wanted to pull Riverdale, Cursed, and which I really liked Cursed, but as a person who liked Cursed, I will not say that it was a perfect show, but it was fun, whatever. I think people say that about Riverdale as well. And then Emily in Paris, which is famously like, I don't know anybody who actually loves it, but people watch it.
Yeah.
So you can see in these distributions, right, it's a lot more heavy in the middle, and then you do start getting those tails, right? So you do start getting, more 1s, you start getting more 6s, you're still getting 10s, but it's not distributed in like what you're about to see, where you have it really weighted towards the bottom and towards the top. There's still a lot of activity going on. Yeah, right now between 8 and 6, where before it was more 7 and above. So really, when you get into these types of shows, you're seeing more 1s, you're seeing more 6s, but there's still a lot of the distribution is still skewed towards higher ratings, but it's just filling out in the middle a little bit more. So then going on to the next slide, if we take a look at shows that have been targeted by mass downvoting campaigns, then you start to see very weird distributions that are completely in the tail. So that middle completely falls out, and you see a lot of 10s and then a lot of 1s. And you see a lot of the 10s too, because now like all of this is becoming just super inaccurate, which let me pause and just say, any data on the internet is statistically inaccurate, and we shouldn't even be using any of this, but we have to, because everybody decided this was going to be the standard for how we talk about how people received media, which sucks, but whatever. Anyway, when you look at shows that have been mass downvoted, you're going to have people who are then rushing to get that score up. So that's why you're going to see suddenly this, big push in the tens. Looking at these distributions I picked Willow, Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power, and then Vampire Academy. I don't know as much about how Vampire Academy was targeted. I have some mutuals of mine who look into that, and I know there was a lot going on with that show as well. So you can see the same distribution with Vampire Academy. Now, if you look at this, right, and if you take out all, this big group of ones and then this group of tens from people being told like, hey, please like rate this up because we have to bring up average, right? You can see that these scores would probably fall between 7 and 9. So, looking very similar to distributions that you would have seen for Shadow and Bone and WandaVision. That's probably where we should be, just looking at where the numbers are falling without these weird tails for Willow. I mean,
it's where like you want more of a median than like, because then you just kind of delete the outliers, because there is a lot of outliers with this.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I guess you could take the median with this. If again, like my whole issue with this is like all of this is just so. It's not statistically accurate anyway. But yeah, I mean, IMDb could take the median instead of the average to get around this. Because you're just so weighted down by these ones. But as we were saying, right, I'm not gonna go through the whole thing. We were just going through on with the culture war nonsense. And again, I'm kind of skirting around that because it is a massive topic. Like I've written well over 100 pages on it. And if you want to really dig into any of that, you can go to the Rewriting Ripley Medium page, which was a podcast. And then I got burnt out and my co-host went to school. So we just stopped doing the podcast part. But all the articles are still there and you can dig in on your own time. Like we're not going to rehash that whole topic. That's a very large topic, but going back to what we were saying before, and I'll go to the next slide and we can look at Rotten Tomatoes. Mass downvoting is just such an easy thing to do, to say, oh wow, look how terrible this show did. And until the media just stops using these scores, until people stop caring about these scores, it's always going to be a really good tool for groups looking to target media who have people
ulterior motives,
or have like gay relationships in their shows. And one thing I do want to point out, right, like if you look at something like Our Flag Means Death, which has like really, really high ratings on IMDb, like it skews actually like maybe a little bit much too towards the tens because they have like such a passionate fan base.
Yeah.
You're not going to see a show like Our Flag Means Death get targeted by these groups of people, even though it does have an on-screen kiss between two men. Because it's not like, one really important thing for the culture war is they have to identify media that is, one, already entrenched in something that has been politicized in the past. So a random British indie show about pirates, like they're just not going to care about that.
It's not a big enough platform to make a battle over.
It's not big enough, and it's not taking anything that they see established in Western culture. So the reason why, Willow gets targeted or Lord of the Rings gets targeted is because it's
Star Wars,
or Star Worms. Yeah, is because it's embedded right into Western culture. And especially right for Willow, because it has a very visible gay relationship, and between two women as well, which frankly never happens. And it is like very, very, bold, and like was great. I think it was one of the best parts of the show. And that is not only a target because it's in, Willow, but because of everything that Disney is going through with the Don't Say Gay bill, and it feeds into that whole right-wing agenda about how, like, Actually, I don't even really want to go into everything that's being said.
Yeah, that's okay.
No, never mind. I'm just going to stop there. If you want to look it up, you can. It's dumb and it's like highly offensive to the queer community, and it's just a lot of conjecture, bringing back ideas that like gay people are pedophiles. It's really whatever. So there's just a huge platform that they can take from that, and then they can like radicalize and stir up from that. So that's another reason why Willow becomes a huge target, where other shows with queer representation just will not. So yeah, Rotten Tomatoes, right? We saw similar thing. I think actually people have done a pretty good job at getting the score up. But it's Rotten Tomatoes is just so easy to target. There was a case in when Captain Marvel came out, and Rotten Tomatoes was trying to change how people reviewed Captain Marvel because it was like instantly review bombed. So again, we've just seen this before. It's just not accurate. There's nothing statistically accurate about Rotten Tomatoes or IMDb. There's no screener. You never know if the person's actually watched the show. I know they put in verified reviews, but like, ooh, yay, you have a verified email. Who cares?
Yeah.
It's just stuff that's super easy to get around. So it's all very dumb. So there's a reason why you always see this really come from YouTubers. So I have an example here of when I did a network analysis for Lord of the Rings for LOTR on Prime, the ad of the official show. So I just looked into, okay, for everybody leaving a negative comment, or I took a sample and I said, okay, like negative being, racism against fans. There was a lot of that. Negativity against the show, any kind of anything like that, or like positive, either you were pushing back against the racism or you were saying something really positive about the show, looking at their following. So who were they following, right? And when I looked at the following in the sample, almost half of the top followed accounts for all of the users saying negative things were YouTubers, versus only 2% from the people who were saying positive things. Yeah, only 2% of their following were from YouTube. So again, you really see this just always start to really coalesce around YouTube. I saw the same thing in The Last Jedi as well when I did that analysis, where I looked through just the top engaged tweets that had The Last Jedi, and yeah, the negative, there were the people leaving those negative comments. Like I think if I remember correctly, it was like almost half of them had a YouTube link or something in their bio. I mean, this is just so centered towards YouTube. Why? Because that's where the culture started back in 2010, right? It's all going to flow from the same thing. It's an easy platform to take advantage of, and it makes people money. So we're not going on to the next slide here. I'm not going to name any names because, as my co-host likes to say, we don't like to make anybody a main character. But it's for really the last 5 years, it's been the same handful of YouTubers just driving this every time. I've just included some of the thumbnails. There's someone here from Lord of the Rings. There's someone here from Willow. One of the Lord of the Rings ones has Leslie Jones in the screen cap because none of them have gotten over freaking Ghostbusters. Like, it's all the same crap again and again. And I think luckily, right, like Disney, I think like has figured this out. Okay, they've been through this so many times. This doesn't mean much to them anymore.
That's good though, right?
Yeah, so I wouldn't be worried about like Disney looking at Rotten Tomatoes or IMDb and seeing like how like weird the distribution is and going, oh yeah, that's a normal thing for a TV show. Like I don't know, like I don't know, but I think it's pretty safe to say they've definitely learned a lot from Captain Marvel, from The Last Jedi, from every other time this has happened. Oh, I mean, obviously we've seen how they've been a lot more vocal in
support of the relationships presented on screen even.
but also, you know, when people are individually targeted, and I know this has happened to several Lucasfilm employees. I mean, not just several, actually, it's happened to over 30 Lucasfilm employees.
Like Moses Ingram, when people targeted her, and everybody came out to basically say, like, no, this is unacceptable.
Right. And then they came out and they supported Amazon Studio when Amazon Studio did the same thing. Like, they know I wouldn't worry about any of these tactics anymore because they're old and everybody's been through them. And then especially, right, if I'll go to the next slide, and if we go towards to look on Twitter, right, and Twitter tends to be more neutral anymore. I'm not quite sure. But I took a sample of just tweets with hashtag Willow from the start of the show. So November 30th until, what was yesterday? The 13th?
13th, sure. Yeah. 15th.
Oh.
No, 14th.
The 13th. Okay.
What day is it?
I don't.
We are recording this in advance.
Look, I hate time. Time hates me. So sorry. So from November 30th till January 13th. It's on the slide. Okay, I could just read it. That's fine. So looking at the top words used, so what that means is that the word was in a tweet at least 300 times. I mean, there's nothing out here that looks in any way negative. I mean, I see the word bad was used, but it's getting, you know, towards less of a frequency. You know, the words that show up first are love, like, a lot of love for Jade and Kit's relationship, a lot of love for Allura, just really, you know, normal things you see from a fan base enjoying a show. Wow.
Oh my gosh.
And then I ran just a quick sentiment analysis. So what this does is it takes a list of like known positive words. So it was like over like 2,000 positive words and then over 4,000 negative words. And it just matches those words together and then gives you, okay, this was how many words were positive in your sample. This is how many words were negative. And then you just get the ratio from that. So it was a 2-to-1, which is, you know, generally I've rarely seen over a 2-to-1 on any time I've ever done this, both like professionally and through this weird hobby I have. So that just means it leaned positive. And yeah, like that's pretty good, right? Even like a 1-to-1 isn't necessarily bad. That just means there was a bit more like mixed conversation. You just don't want there to be more negative words than positive words typically.
But that's good. It means that people are talking about it in a positive way and talking about it a fair amount.
Yeah, and I'll go to the next slide because like this was the one I think that was most interesting for me is that you do see a rise in conversation as the show progresses, right? It is worth noting this is not a normal statistic that typically people analyzing social media will use. But on November 30th, there were about 1,500 unique accounts. And then when we get to the finale, while there were more tweets, there were less distinct accounts. So there was about 1.2K, but, you know, pretty close. Like that's not a big, and here's the thing. I'm not saying that you can't claim that's a drop off. Like that's not how social media analytics work. But just wanted to put that into context. There are more tweets. There are less users, but still, you still have, you know, clearly this engaged, and that's a sample by the way, that's not a population. So don't take that as like, that was the number of people talking about Willow. No, that was the number of people in the sample. So yeah, so you see this really nice upward trend in how many times the hashtag was being tweeted. What you don't want to see, right, and what's really bad is when you have a huge spike at the beginning and then it just drops. And I've seen this before because I was working on a project with Game of Thrones IP, and it was right when was season 6 the last season of Game of Thrones. I'm not a Game of Thrones person. Whatever, that last season.
Yeah, the last season when things kind of went off the rails.
Okay.
And then suddenly people stopped talking about it.
Oh my God. No, the trend is so funny. It like there was a really nice hype bubble where all the conversation was super high. And then it just like, it just fell and like never came back. Even with people being angry about it. Because the thing is, right, is when you have like huge properties like that, most people are going to be casual. They're going to log in on the first day, say, oh my God, Game of Thrones. And they may log back in every week to say like, that was cool. That was
a great episode. Yeah. Or whatever. Yeah.
And then they'll typically all come back at the end for a final opinion. When you don't,
they're not like the What the Force audience that is like literally talking about it all the time.
MC, you would be taken out. You were an outlier.
I know. I'm sorry.
No, but like, you know, that's a normal thing to happen when you just suddenly see a fall off in conversation, even for these big shows, because, you know, the casual people just aren't logging in anymore to give an opinion. Like they've just bounced. That's also a big thing. Like when you watch like movie conversation, the best gauge for sentiment is going to be within the first 2 weeks. And then everything after that are like the super engaged people that, unless you're specifically looking for their opinion, it's going to be terribly biased, which is another super, super funny thing about the culture war thing, because they like to like frame themselves as like, we're the fans. It's like, you know how many people watch, I'll just take Star Wars. You know how many people watch Star Wars? You know how many people? Millions and millions. Like, millions.
Never think about it afterwards.
Right. And you were like a group of like, maybe I'll be generous and I'll say like 30,000 people who are engaged to like in various ways. Okay. This like very, I guess like, I guess just this very engaged group of people who sit on YouTube to discuss Star Wars every day. You were all outliers, okay? In a regular survey, in a screener, you would probably be screened out unless people are looking for super fans, or I guess people who weirdly make money off of hating something. But the point, it's incredibly, this is a good trend, what we see with Willow, right? Because it shows great. An engaged audience that grew over time. You know, as the show, or at least the engagement grew over time, right? And so there's really nothing concerning here. There's nothing in any way that shows me that this wasn't a well-received show. And so going to the last slide here, you know, how do we counteract these easily manipulated online ratings? Knowing that probably the media is not going to drop them as relevant anytime soon. Knowing that, you know, most people at this point are like, hey, what's the Rotten Tomatoes score, right? Like that's just something that's now kind of just a normal thing to look at. You know, really the only thing that we can do is advocate for some kind of publicly available, like statistically accurate score, like the cinema score, right? So cinema score, like they have people who go out and like physically survey people at the theater who just watched the film. And they get that initial reaction, and that becomes the score. Obviously, that doesn't exist for streaming because you can't use the same methodology. But if there was a way to like get a panel of people, and I am sure, by the way, I am sure Disney has this. Like, I am sure the people running Disney Plus have a collective group of people who they ask, hey, how did our show go? Who they've screened out. And they know that they've watched it. They know they're not like weirdly thinking that this is going to be the end of all culture as we know it. Like they're not radicalized, you know, individuals. They're just people watching a TV show. And I guarantee you they have that score. I would love to have some kind of publicly available, you know, score to look at for that. We don't for streaming. But until we get something like that, just, you know, a friendly reminder, all data on the internet is bullcrap. Yeah.
Exactly. So I guess for those engaged fans of the What the Force community who are screened out of all of our statistics, what can we do to, I guess, help Willow or encourage or do anything?
I mean, if you want to go and like throw a 10-star, like throw a 100% Rotten Tomatoes, you could do that. I mean, the thing that may impact, right, is if you have like new viewers who just casually like, oh, I want to watch the show. Oh, that's a low rating. Maybe I won't. technically you can go and do that, but I'll be honest, I think it's probably more worth it to just show that, you know, you have appreciation for it, you know, like, because word of mouth is always the most important indicator for what people end up watching. Like, for example, like I never would have watched Willow if I wasn't in, you know, if I wasn't friends with you, just because I don't really watch TV, or watch TV shows. It overwhelms me. I don't like it. There's too much content now. I hate streaming, whatever. But yeah, like if my community of people were not like invested in it every day, I never would have watched it. So I think, you know, the more people who you have around you who you're like, yeah, I really enjoyed Willow, right? And you just, you know, because it's always going to be those unique people watching it that are going to boost the ratings, right? So word of mouth is always the most important. That's worth more of your time and energy than an IMDb score or Rotten Tomato score. And so yeah, and like, look, again, like everything on Twitter right now, besides the people obviously spreading some negativity about it, you know, it's been like really positive. It's been really, really great. Like the community so far is, you know, just really focused on the story itself, or, you know, celebrating. I know like the queer community is really excited about it. And they've been really cool about it. And yeah, I mean, so far I think it's been a nice place to talk to people in. Unfortunately, we'll see how long that lasts, just because
changes are coming. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, so just word of mouth, no more.
Yeah. So like if I'm gonna take that and turn it into a Marie Claire way of putting that, just literally just love the hell out of it. Like be happy about it because you are happy about it. Be true. And other people will be like, yeah, I see it. Yeah. So that's my opinion. That was a long way to say, just continue to love Willow if you already love it. And people will see that and want to try it out.
Yeah, don't get bogged down by
The negativity.
It's just not going to matter. And frankly, like that kind of stuff just gives them, I guess, perceived power. They don't actually have any, because again, like we've been through this so many times. Everybody who needs to know what this is knows. You know, I'm really hoping, but I'm pretty sure about that, again, because of like what we've been seeing, especially from the Star Wars social media account, right? Like there's clearly been a switch over there of like, this is a problem, we're going to choose strategically when to address it, because you don't want to address it all the time, because then you just give them fuel for a lot of videos. So yeah, but I wouldn't worry about it. I think like if there's like a concern that like, oh no, Willow's not going to get renewed, like renew Willow is one of like the top words that show up whenever anybody talks about Willow. And I don't even know if like, I don't know if like a renew Willow campaign would necessarily matter at this point. I don't like, because I just don't know where the decision is. Obviously, you know, people can continue to do it, but yeah, just watch the show.
Just watch the show and tell your friends about it and enjoy it. I think that's also part of it. Like if you're enjoying it, it's going to spread joy-wise, because people that missed it in January because they were busy or over Christmas are going to catch up, and that still helps, right?
Right. And we see that as well, like in the conversation, you know, going back to the trend we see on Twitter, you know, we clearly see there was like, you know, a group of people engaged for the first episode, which is normal. You always see a spike, beginning, end. But, you know, interestingly, you know, we saw a pretty good spike in the penultimate episode, and then, you know, a spike again, obviously, for the finale. But you kept seeing a growth again in that conversation as more people were again getting more engaged, getting more interested. But then also, yeah, like I came in, most people I know around me, like anecdotally, most people around me came in probably around like the 4th, 5th episode. Oh wait, no, I was caught up just in time for the last one, so I actually watched it recently.
I bugged you until you watched it, and then and then you watched it, and then you're like, okay, I'm sold, Marie Claire. Yeah.
It's fun. Yeah, I would love to see a season 2. And yeah, honestly, like I think we're gonna get it. I'm personally not concerned.
Yeah. Well, Katie, thank you so much for your insight, knowledge, data, doing all these pulls of different things and looking at this to explain to people that in too long didn't read. Just love the hell out of Willow because it's worth loving.
Can I just say this is the most painful data poll I've ever had to do because I keep getting rate limited, and it used to be so much easier before Elno took over.
Yeah.
And now, because he gutted the API team,
everything was hard.
Pain in my ass. Pain in my ass. That's okay.
All right. Thank you, Katie, for coming on. And I look forward to linking to Rewriting Ripley. All of the articles are amazing if you want to dig into more of that.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. Cheers.